Okay, so we're here with Amrita Baba, and Amrita Baba has a new project going at the moment called Revitalized Zen, which implies that there's something to revitalize about Zen. So I was quite intrigued about this and wanted to ask Baba what is it that he wants to achieve with Revitalized Zen? Where does he see it going? Um, So we'll take a deep dive into the very essence of what Zen is, what makes Zen unique and special as a Buddhist vehicle to take one to full and perfect enlightenment, and what are the state of affairs today with Zen? Is there a gap between the two, and can we bridge that gap through understanding and through correct practice? What practices do we need to what correct understanding and what correct practices do we need to understand and develop in order to actually progress along the path through the four stages of Zen, which are the Kenshos, the awakenings in plural. There's multiple awakenings that we need to work through, several layers of selfing that we need to work through to realize Buddha nature. Satori, which is establishing spontaneous, selfless clarity as we work through the residual karmas in each layer, which leads to Daigo Tete, the falling away of the body and mind. And are there extra practices that are needed to work with the body as well as the mind to achieve Nyorai or Jobutsu, the full and perfect Buddhahood? So, Baba, what is it that makes Zen unique and special as a vehicle as compared to the other Buddhist vehicles, the Vajrayana and the Theravada? If we're trying to explain to someone who's perhaps new to Zen or trying to understand what is the quintessence of Zen, what is the main focus of Zen as compared to the other vehicles that we need to understand if we're going to progress along this path?
Yes. Okay, so it is said that there are three ways to attain Buddhahood, and those three ways are Sutra, Tantra, and Chokchen, or Sutra, Tantra, and Mahasandhi teachings. Uh, so, what does that mean? Sutra, Tantra, and Chokchen as ways to attain Buddhahood. It means that uh, first of all, we need to understand that this is Mahayana teaching. So Mahayana Buddhism, Mahayana Dharma. Uh, so this is, you mentioned Theravada or Hinayana a moment ago. So we need to understand that Theravada or Hinayana vehicle and Mahayana vehicle are two, they are similar practices, same practice principles, but the extent, the scope of result is very different. So in Mahayana Dharma, in Mahayana Sutra, in Mahayana Tantra, and in Chokchen, the goal is always the attainment of Buddhahood in this life. And there's not really anything special about Zen. There are many Mahayana schools, many schools of Mahayana Buddhism. So, and Zen is not, excuse me, special compared to the other schools. It's just that I have karmic closeness, karmic affinity with Zen. And if I had to find a specific reason in Zen about the specialty of Zen, it would be that if there are solid standards in Zen, if Zen method, whether it's this method or Soto or Rinzai or any of the schools that have disappeared in history, there used to be so many different Zen schools in ancient China, and even in Japan these days there are three. not only Soto and Rinzai, but also Obaku school. But Obaku is very little known because it's so small, and I don't even know if it has been transmitted to the West. I have never heard of that. But the point is that there are very clear standards in Mahayana Dharma that apply to both Sutra and Tantra, which are the like different styles of path of Mahayana teaching. So Sutra means that, well, it's easier to explain that what Tantra is. Tantra is like an esoteric path where the nature of the practice, the nature of the path, the nature of the relationship between a teacher or a guru and student is different than in Sutra. Sutra, maybe you could say that it's a bit more simple, but both Sutra and Tantra necessarily need to have same standards, because if the same standards are not there, the goal of Buddhahood, attaining Buddhahood, disappears, ceases to exist. And so I felt that, I did quite short formal Zen practice back in the day, just about 4 years. And after that, I have done sessions, Zen retreats here and there over the years. Alongside with my tantric practice and tantric study, I'm being a tantric teacher for soon 17 years, full-time teacher. So what I have learned from tantric Buddhism, Vajrayana, is those standards, about those standards. And then because of that karmic affinity, karmic connection that I have with Zen Buddhism, is why I felt that I've always felt like a kind of, even as a student very early on, I felt that learning Dharma instantly makes me responsible for it. Responsible in the sense that not necessarily wanting to share with others, but needing to share with others. So this responsibility of learning the Dharma, and then, having become a teacher, having been asked to teach by both of my teachers, and just this sense of responsibility that, seeing so many different problems and issues in the methods, not only all the scandals and dramas that happen, but this responsibility that I know how to fix the problems, persistent problems in the existing methods, that are quite many, and then knowing where the standards need to be, what the standards are, so that the method, Zen method, actually becomes a vehicle for one to attain Buddhahood in this life. Yeah. So that's why I felt like, for many years, it was in the back of my head, as I have gone to different Zen retreats with different teachers, and now there's YouTube, and one thing that how there is, in Zen Buddhism, the most of my Zen training I did in Rinzai Zen school. And my master was Terayama Tanchu Roshi, who was really famous in Japan, but very little known outside Japan. He published, I think, 2 or 3 books in English. These can still be found from Amazon. But what was special about Terayama Roshi is that he wasn't only a Zen master. Like he trained in the traditional Rinzai Zen tradition under Omori Sogen Roshi and became his Dharma successor. I would say that he became his main Dharma heir. Omori Sogen Roshi had other Dharma heirs, but Terayama Roshi was so widely respected and highly, how do you say, highly respected, that I would say that he was his main Dharma heir. But what is special about this lineage is that Terayama Roshi passed to me is that there is not only Zen practice. Oh, first of all, he didn't teach the traditional Rinzai Zen method. He didn't teach koans. He finished the whole traditional training system, but he didn't pass it on to his students for the reason that he felt that it wasn't effective enough. And I'm not completely sure how he ended up in that conclusion, why he stopped teaching traditional Rinzai Zen and why he stopped practicing it. But I think that his view changed when he was about 2-3 years in the Indian Himalayas and in Nepal in late 70s. And I think it was then when his view really changed, because he met all these different yogis and lamas. Late 70s, it was still, there were so many Tibetan Mahasiddhas, fully enlightened masters alive. And I think that meeting them, or some of them, really changed his view. So that's one thing. He didn't teach Rinzai Zen. And I perfectly understand now myself, having this experience and view that I have now, I perfectly understand it, why he decided not to do that. And another unique feature of his lineage is the arts. So, he was a professor in calligraphy. He taught in a couple of universities in Tokyo area, and he practiced Zen calligraphy and studied Zen calligraphy all his life. Also martial arts, like Zen flavored martial arts, not like just boxing or wrestling or something like this. But he was always, his greatest passion, just like mine, was to express the Buddha mind through arts, and even to awaken through arts. So in Terayama Roshi's lineage of Zen calligraphy, which goes back to ancient China, to a calligrapher saint Wang Shi-tse, who's really famous, this saint, this immortal, there is this emphasis of feeling the energy, feeling the charge, feeling the blessings. And this was something that I had already been introduced in shiatsu. I became a shiatsu therapist and also a energy healer, Reiki healer, back in the day, before going to Japan. And with Terayama Roshi, I got a very expanded view, an idea about transmission and energy, the role of energy, not only in art, but in Zen. And that I have not seen with, it is a thing in, I'm mostly familiar with Japanese Zen culture, but I'm sure it is the case in China, in Korea, in other areas, that there is this basic understanding that when somebody who has realization of whatever degree, when such a person paints, draws, maybe does a sculpture, creates some form of art piece, then that person's realization, state of mind, Buddha mind, gets, gets infused, can I use that word? Gets infused into that work of art. And this is why traditionally, people have sought calligraphies, paintings, sculptures, these art pieces to their homes, made by, monks, masters, nuns, Dharma masters. So, what was I speaking about? How was this related to revitalized Zen? So, I have pretty extensive collection of Zen art. I used to run a Zen art gallery for a couple of years in 2012 to 14, something like this. It was very, very small little side project along with teaching, but I have a pretty extensive collection of Zen calligraphy, mainly from Japanese masters, but some from China, some from Taiwan. And I've used that as a way to hone my understanding of Zen, reading their energy. I even have some, Zen master Hakuin's works from a few hundred years ago. So this has been a very important way for me to understand the state of Zen and Buddhism today. And this, of course, in my tantric work in Amrita Mandala, we use all this knowledge that I've accumulated over the years and decades daily in our practice. And I just want to, what I learned from Terayama Roshi and what I've learned from tantric side, tantric yogas, I want to use that knowledge, and I am using that knowledge as a way to revitalize Zen, because there is definitely need for it.
I find it quite interesting that you've got such a engineer type mind, a very pragmatic
Yeah.
mind of that there's particular practices that you need to do that gets you from A to B. You want to see the
Yes.
results of those, but you're always talking in terms of art and talking as if Buddhahood is an art form, and yet the way you talk about it is you're very much engineer mindset, but yet talk about the art side of things. So there you are discussing the pragmatic use of the energy within the art, expressing the arts as a form of Buddha nature.
Yes, yes. I was just meaning to go through my old notes and diaries and so on from my days in Japan, and I have somewhere like a A4, or maybe it was like 2 or 3 A4s that we used in Terayama Roshi's practice sessions in his home dojo in Tokyo, as well as in other training places. He had this form, this I don't know, maybe 50 questions or something like this. The way how it is practiced in Hitsuzendo school of Zen calligraphy is that first we sit together, then we do some yoga, qigong practices. I'm using just general terms, yoga, qigong. And then we write. Or we might first do yoga and qigong and then sit and then write with brush and black ink on white paper. And then when everybody is done, in Japanese homes you have this alcove at homes. It's called tokonoma. And traditionally you place like a calligraphy in that alcove. And in Roshi's home, in his home dojo, there was also tokonoma, and he always chose a few Zen calligraphies to be placed there that we first studied. Energetically, we studied the form of it, the movement, how, tracing the ink, how it had been written. And this is kind of a sidetrack that I'm getting to now, but tracing the movement is incredibly, it's like, it's an incredible how do you say, like a treasure chest, because when you know how to, you don't have to see the calligraphy physically, because there are many calligraphy books. I've done this a lot in my life, tracing the body movement, the movement of the hara, of the you know whole body, through Zen master Hakuin's calligraphies, many other masters, and it teaches you so much about the body and the use of the body and movement, what those Zen masters did. But the point that I'm getting to is that Roshi put these calligraphies in the tokonoma, and we studied it and we copied them. We made our own versions of their calligraphies, and then we put our copies up, and then we would analyze each other's. Roshi's calligraphy, his senior teachers, everybody else's, including mine. And we used these forms, papers, to make our notes. And those papers, he had made like 50 or so questions about different aspects, the composition of the calligraphy. I'm not sure, maybe there was even something about the philosophical meaning about the calligraphy, though that is not important at all. It's all about that energy, that bokki, that pure ki, pure energy, blessings that come from the calligraphy. That's the main thing in Zen calligraphy. So your ones, there are actually examples of this, how some Zen masters, when they wrote something, it looks awful on the level of form. It looks like it's written by a child, somebody who doesn't know how to write the characters. But the energy is something that only a highly realized or fully enlightened master can do. I have a number of calligraphies made by fully enlightened Buddhas, and it's incredible. It's great. But my point is that Terayama Roshi, he also had this engineering, the mind of a mechanic. He always wanted to figure out things, and definitely his priority was use what works, use what makes your practice better, your realization deeper. And this spirit, that so many Buddhists, so many practitioners, so many Zen Buddhists forget, was there was this ancient Chinese Zen master called Joshu. There is this Mu Koan, does a dog have a Buddha nature? And Zen master Joshu answered, no, Mu. But it was that Zen master Joshu who said that, when I think he said it when he was already at an advanced age. He said that even if a small child has a deeper realization than I do, I will become his student. Or even if an older person is more advanced than me, I will become his student. But this, we need to use what works better, because we don't have time to waste.
Yeah, so this is interesting to me, because I'm as someone who's a little bit naive on Zen, trying to understand whether this actually a common thing in Zen, that they use energies or understand energies. And one way I've come to try and understand it for myself, what is the importance of this. When I was reading, I know you like this book,
Oh,
The Sword of No Sword by Teshu, and
that's my
you can,
Bible.
yeah, it's very interesting, because there's a very clear and definite point where Teshu says that he becomes enlightened, and you can see his calligraphy before and after in the book. So you can get some sort of sense of the energy. And if we think of it in terms of binary, not enlightened, enlightened, regardless of all the stages that come along, there's a clear difference between even high attainment and enlightenment.
Yes,
So there is a way to sort of read the energies of enlightened or not
yes,
enlightened. And then we get a bit more subtle, and can we work out the energies of different stages of attainment?
And that is exactly my point about revitalized Zen, about those standards. That what is so strange to me is that I've heard so many Zen teachers and Zen masters, both in person and online, speak of Kensho, awakening experience, often in singular.
Mm.
So, I haven't seen that many presentations by traditional Zen teachers where they really spoke about awakenings in plural. But, if you read Zen Master Hakuin, he is very clear about this, that we need to have many kenshos. If you read Torei Enji, Torei was Zen Master Hakuin's main Dharma heir. Torei says that he had something like 95 kenshos.
Yeah.
And yet, somehow, modern proponents of Zen just usually speak of a single or maybe couple awakenings. But
You
here,
do sometimes
yeah,
you do sometimes get the other extreme where they think it's unlimited. There's no
oh,
ending to
yes, yes,
awakening.
yeah, but that enlightenment would be like an open-ended process. That I can't remember, at least from the top of my head, being said by traditional Zen teachers. So that's more like a kind of like a perhaps Advaita thing, that it's an open-ended process, but it isn't. Of course, it isn't. But yeah, those standards set by Shakyamuni Buddha himself, that have been, how do you say, that have been exemplified, demonstrated by so many generations. Something that I've spoken on my Revitalized Zen YouTube videos is ancestor practice and Zen patriarchs, like lineage masters. And there is a practice that is done in all traditional lineages of Zen, Soto, Rinzai, or otherwise, which is to recite the names of the lineage masters, going back to Shakyamuni Buddha and even Buddhas before Shakyamuni Buddha. And nowadays, in 21st century, we are somewhere like, maybe like 90 names, 90 generations. And this is chanted, whether it's a city center or monastery or a temple. This is a stable practice. But I have never heard a discussion. This is related to that energetic analysis that I started learning with Terayama Roshi, and then I have really, I would say, become a specialist in it during my Vajrayana years, because of the teachings that I've received from my Vajrayana masters. But I have never really heard a discussion on anybody even ask the question that, okay, we have 90 generations of masters. Were they all attained Buddhas or not? So, of course, we can logically say that some of them must have been fully enlightened Buddhas. Shakyamuni Buddha definitely was. But then it is also logical that maybe some of them weren't. And this is actually the whole, in Amrita Mandala and in Revitalized Zen, we use this two-part formula to generate the first Kensho. And again, there is an army of Zen lineage holders, some very famous masters who always have said that, no, there is no one technique that works for all, and Kensho cannot be directly generated. But that is not correct. That is false. It might be correct in the context of their own particular tradition, but it is not universally true. There are and have been in traditional lineages of Buddha Dharma practices that directly generate Kensho and that works for everybody. So in our lineage tradition, we have the so-called two-part formula for the first awakening and then other practices after that. Mainly, bodhicitta, dynamic concentration, ancestor practice, Buddha practice, and so on. But the point back to those standards. So in the two-part formula, one already learns about the two modes of the mind. One clear, stable, unchanging, selfless, and the other self-based, chaotic, noisy, unclear. And really the difference between Buddhas and sentient beings, or Buddhas and practicing bodhisattvas who haven't yet attained Buddhahood, is just like the two modes. Buddhas effortlessly remain, stay, abide, without abiding, in this selfless clarity marked by softness, spontaneous kindness, marked by groundedness, peacefulness at all times. But even if somebody is advanced in practice, you can think of maybe, I have met one Zen master who was a living Buddha. That was Tangen Roshi, Harada Tangen Roshi, who passed away in 2018. I've mentioned him, I've spoken of him many times in my Revitalized Zen videos. So he was a living Buddha, but then I have met a small army of other Zen teachers and Zen masters, Roshis, who were somewhere along the way. But then, well, it's not really my business whether they knew it or not. It's not really my concern what people think of that. But when I look at these people, not for the sake of criticizing these people or something like that, but again, as an engineer, as a mechanic, in that sense, it is very useful to know where I am in practice, where everybody is on the map, and how close or how far that end goal of Buddhahood is. This is the case with everything. I've often spoken when I teach secular education and the necessity of pedagogics that work. Necessity of good pedagogics. So we can see this. The one problem is that we can easily engage ourselves with all kinds of projects, techniques, and practices with enthusiasm, with faith. But it's a different question altogether whether or not they take us to the end goal. And how do we know if it works in that sense, if it takes us to the end goal or not? We know if we have awakening experiences, if we recognize our true nature, if not on daily basis, then on regular basis. This is absolutely necessary for a Zen method, for any Dharma method to be authentic. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was something that led me on a bit of a further search. So I was practicing a form of Buddhism and really enjoying it. There's a strong community,
Mm.
but it's not until the hardship happens that things fall apart, life falls apart, that you start to question your practice. And it's like I really was in search of answers, but it felt like my world was collapsing in. And so when I thought about, well, what is enlightenment? Where is enlightenment on the trajectory of where I am and where I'm going? And where I was going was sort of a gradual progress and then dropping off a cliff. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to be up here. How do I connect the dots? And this was such, for some reason, it's absolutely unknown to me, but awakening wasn't on my radar at all, really. Like it just wasn't. I don't know why. But then at this, after all this questioning, I suddenly realized, okay, awakening is what I need to do. Awakenings where I need to somehow find answers to this existential crisis, this existential confusion I'm in. So it was very lucky for me that this search led me to the two-part formula. And
Yeah.
then, something similar happened to you with Zen, where you had this disillusionment as a monk, and you didn't have that first awakening. This was what your search was for. You came to the point where you realized this was what you're searching for, but you're spending all of this time and you're not seeing actual results. So how do we connect those two together, the practice and the results?
Yes, and it's a really strange situation in the world of Dharma today that has been predicted by many Dharma masters over centuries. They speak of the dark age of Dharma. I think we are in the middle of dark age of Dharma at the moment, because something that simple is being misunderstood, is sometimes being purposefully mispresented by lineage holders. Sometimes, I have seen, and people have told me, over the years, many people have written me because I've had a blog for many, many years, different blogs. I've been talking about these things openly, so many people over the years have written me and contacted me. There was even like a UK, Ireland-based Zen Buddhist Sangha who asked me to become their new teacher when they previous teacher founder passed away. And, I taught them for a few years, and some of them still practice with me. But I have quite a bit of, inside information about this. So it is very strange that awakening has somehow become a thing that some avoid being Dharma teachers and practitioners. It's like we are doing practice of Buddha Dharma, follow the Buddha's path, but then we avoid Buddha nature. That's incredibly, what can you say to that? And then the other version of it is that these awakenings are so rare. I remember from my days in the monastery, there was a monk there. He had left before I arrived there. I started my training there. And he had been there for maybe 10, 15 years, and he was very liked in the community. He was also very liked by the Roshi, by the Zen master. And I think that the Zen master had expectations for this monk. He wanted this monk to become his Dharma heir. But then he suddenly left. I don't remember what he did. But I remember the story of him that was told to me when I came there. And it was about this monk's, senior monk's, one Kensho. So, it was whispered to me, kind of inside, close circle information that, this monk had this one Kensho that really shook the whole Sangha for 3 months. And, it is fantastic that it happened. But Kensho's awakening experience, whether we are talking in the context of Zen Buddhism or any other type of Buddhism, They are the heart and soul, the bread and butter of Dharma. And, you know, I would say, based on my experience as a Dharma teacher of nearly 17 years, full-time Dharma teacher, that's all I've done, professionally. I have seen, using the principles, the bodies, our bodies are the same as Shakyamuni Buddha's. The human body and the human mind is the same. We have the same bodies and minds like Shakyamuni Buddha and all the patriarchs and all the future generations have. And that pretty much sets up, decides how practices how practices need to be practiced and what the practices need to be so that our mind becomes illuminated. Okay, it's that simple. What was I saying just a moment ago? So yes, about the ordinariness. Is that a word, ordinariness, of awakening? So if those mechanisms of the body mind, if and when they are not understood, then the methods, the paths, the lineage teachings, the practices become little relevant or entirely irrelevant.
Yeah.
So we can engage with all these practices and lighting an incense and candle and doing prostrations and chanting sutras and doing zazen, however we understand it. But it is a different question entirely if there are signs that this is an authentic practice. And the signs are that, even for a beginner, total beginner, one can have the first Kensho literally on day one of one's practice. We have seen this with two-part formula. One of the stories that I remember is somebody who was reading Awake book, and she awakened on page 12 of the book. And there are so many others who have had their first Kensho on day one, day two, simply because they applied that little practice. So it is, human psychology is really complex in a sense because our mind and our psyche does so many things and is capable of such a wide range of emotional expression. But having said that, the mechanisms of mind and mechanisms of self-delusion and trauma are actually very simple. And if you don't understand those mechanisms, it's kind of like if we have a car mechanic. And a good car mechanic understands that, what these mechanisms are. And that's how master mechanic can easily fix a complex problem. But to somebody who doesn't understand, might also have the title of car mechanic, but doesn't really understand the ins and outs, might, scratch their heads and be doing something, be engaged in doing something, but not fixing the car. It is exactly like that.
I was just thinking I'm a van driver, but I have no idea how the engine or whatever actually works.
Yeah, but hopefully you don't stay a van driver for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So you don't have to.
Yeah. Well, so we have this first Kensho. So some people might think this is a ridiculous claim that someone can have their first Kensho in a day. But
Mm.
then where is it that we're going to? What is the actual potential of Zen? So what is the whole path of Zen, and what are the practices that lead us to get there? If we think of the actual of the purpose that we would want to achieve is enlightenment, not just in this lifetime. We want to achieve it in this lifetime, but really we don't want to wait until old age just before we're dead to attain
Yeah,
enlightenment. It would be very useful to attain it within less than decades, so that we have time to act upon the world as a beneficial Buddha, maybe with a couple or a few decades to be a Buddha and be of benefit to all sentient beings. So really, we want the most effective practices, and your point is that the initial Kensho is the very beginning. This is the start of the path. So then we have a series of Kenshos, and then we have Satori, which is clearing the debris, as it were, establishing selfless clarity of the mind. So maybe you
yeah,
want to discuss how do we actually get there? What's the potential of Zen?
yeah. So, first of all, you started saying, before speaking about the four stages of Zen, that have all been discussed by the Zen patriarchs. Yes, it is natural. I've encountered it many times over the years that people say that, well, that's bullshit. You cannot, first of all, generate Kensho because that's what all the lineage holders say, that it's not possible. There is no techniques like that. But it is. It is. I have discussed this with one Tibetan Buddhist teacher, comes to mind especially, who told me that, his master, who was really famous, Tulgu Urgyen Rinpoche, that what we do in two-part formula is almost identical with the technique that Tulgu Urgyen taught for his new students to generate that first awakening. Semgotropa
I'll
is what they call in Tibetan. Yeah?
I'll put the link in the description of the two-part formula so people can go directly and see the instructions for themselves. Like you've
Yes.
got the actual mechanics of how awakening works by
Yeah.
reading the instructions and understanding them.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, there is something that happens, I think, to all of us in some extent, which is that when we get invested in something, and then when somebody says after some time that, actually your investment is not that smart, there is something much better you could invest, we get very defensive and sometimes offensive. I've seen this a lot through the years in the world of Tantra, and probably I've already started seeing it a little bit in Revitalized Zen. This fighting, because we don't want to admit that we have spent our time, that our time and energy and money has been wasted. We don't want to admit that. It was the hardest thing for me as well. It was the hardest thing because I put everything I had. I wanted to spend my life studying Zen and maybe becoming a teacher and, sharing the wealth of the tradition with others. That's all I wanted to do. But then after 4 years, there was specific experience that forced me to realize that this is not working. And it was the most painful, maybe 6 months or something, to really accept it, because I was so invested, I was so engaged with traditional Zen that I really didn't want to hear of any other options. So this happens to us. We do get really attached and fixated with whatever we love. Okay? So that's a thing. But there is also this teaching called non-attachment. So,
It's just a small one in Buddhism.
yeah, just a little side teaching, like a side dish on the menu. So yeah, the two-part formula and all these practices that I'm talking about here are freely available. You don't have to, nobody has to pay a dime to learn the two-part formula or get our books. I don't have a Revitalized Zen website yet, so all these materials can be found from Amrita Mandala website or Revitalized Zen Facebook, but there will be a Revitalized Zen website also. But it is essential to remember that practice is never belief based. It cannot be. If it is belief based, it unavoidably also means that there is attachment involved. And when there is attachment involved, it is a completely samsaric, or let's say colored by samsaric tendencies, habits, patterns. So, sorry, what was the point you were saying about? I don't remember what you said a moment ago.
Well, so now we want to connect this initial awakening to what
Oh,
is the actual potential for Zen. Can Zen be used as a vehicle to attain enlightenment within the next decade, say?
yes, yes. Yes, it can.
So, what is the understanding that we need, and what are the correct practices that will actually bring fruition and results along the path?
So, I have written a lengthy article about this where I briefly explain the main 4 stages. The 4th one being Nyorai or Jobutsu, which means Buddhahood. And then there are the previous 3 stages of Kensho or awakenings, Satori or perfections, and Daigo or Daigo Tette, which means it literally means great awakening, but it's not to be taken literally. It means when, in Zen language, when the body falls away. Is that how you say it? So, okay. So we can easily have this first opening. Doesn't require belief. It only requires applying the practice and understanding what is done with the practice. Okay? I could tell you stories about this. I mentioned that UK and Ireland based Zen group that had been practicing for, I think, something like 15 years, if not more, together. And 35 people, 2 of them had an initial awakening when I started teaching them, and in 2 months 31 of them had awakened. 2 didn't awaken because they didn't follow through the process. They didn't want to pursue the technique. So in 2 months, 31 people, basically the whole Sangha, had initial awakening. And these were people who they were really committed, solid practitioners. Daily home practice, a small Sangha, daily home practice, and monthly retreats. And they had done that for 15 years or something like that. So it wasn't like a really solid bunch of people. So after the first opening, okay, maybe it's best that I speak of the 3 bodies. 3 bodies. In Mahayana Buddhism, there is a doctrine called Trikaya, which literally means 3 bodies. Trikaya, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. This also applies to Zen, Trikaya doctrine. And the physical body is of course the most obvious. Then we have 2 different types of minds. We don't only have one subtle body, but we have 2 different, distinctly different subtle bodies. One is made of, that is probably a familiar term with many Zen Buddhists, one is made of meridians. Meridian is a English word that is used in traditional Chinese medicine. in acupuncture, in shiatsu, and so on. But this first, grosser of the two subtle bodies is made of meridian channels, and it is in the form of the physical body, like the energetic counterpart, or like an energetic blueprint of the physical body, made of meridians, and I just call it astral body. Astral body. It's not the best term for it, but works. So that's the first one of the subtle bodies. And that's the body, the astral body, when we speak of daigo tete, dropping, falling away of the body. It is falling away of the body. There is a classical Zen phrase, Shinjin Datsuraku, which means, in Japanese, it means dropping off body and mind. Zen master Dogen used this phrase, but it originated, I believe, from his teacher's teacher, who was a Chinese Zen master, Shinjin Datsuraku, dropping off body and mind. So when in Daigo, we can momentarily have the body or the astral body drop off and have this momentary cessation. Or when we advance, when we have many momentary falling away of the body or astral body, then at some point it becomes permanent. The body, astral body, falls away permanently. And there are Zen masters alive today whose body has fell off, but their mind hasn't. And so when we speak of a dropping off body and mind, body refers to the astral body or the meridian system, and the mind refers to the other type of subtle body, the one that creates the auric field, the energetic field. And that's, it's made of different types of channels. Meridians are like pretty thick, about the thickness of my little finger, and the energetic sensation is denser, while the subtler of the subtle bodies, it's much lighter, the channels are thinner, there are much more channels, many thousands, and I often call it the causal body. So when we speak of these kenshos and satoris, it's commonly said that kensho is just an awakening, and satori, it's like a deeper awakening. Deeper. So kensho is already something that it's a major awakening experience. It changes the mind permanently. And satori is like a deeper version of that. And these kenshos and satoris happen in the causal body. What in that phrase Shinjin Datsuraku is expressed as a dropping off of the mind. So it is in the causal body, in these lighter nadi channels, where our existential confusion is located, is stored. What is existential confusion? This is the dukkha that the Buddha, in his Four Noble Truths teaching, the first teaching that he gave, he spoke about this. This existential pain, existential confusion, that we don't know who we are, where we are, what we are supposed to do, what's the meaning of life, what's the point of life. And the reason why we don't know the point is because we are deluded. We are deluded by the fact that we believe in separately, individually existing small self or entity. We believe that I or me, that there is such an entity, such a being in our body, in our mind. We believe. We have this belief that I am here in the body and I am living my life and making my decisions in relation to the world and people around me. But this is delusion. This is a delusion. So for starters, we have there is an illusion of self, because the whole culture, everybody around us has the same problem. So it creates this illusion that everybody has this self, this I, this me. And then we start believing that we also have this self-entity, this entity that we call me or I. But that's a delusion. It's such an entity doesn't exist. So when we speak of kenshos and satoris, awakenings or openings, and then perfecting those openings with satori experiences, again, the theory that I use is based on classical Mahayana Buddhism, the so-called 10 bhumis, dasha bhumi, 10 bhumis. This is a classical Mahayana doctrine that I've been teaching now for, what year is it? Something like 12, 13 years. And I've asked a couple of Tibetan Buddhist teachers who are also academics if they knew a Tibetan Buddhist lineage that used bhumis as a path map. But they instantly said that no, it is not used. So it has been forgotten what these 10 bhumis mean. But I learned it from my master back in the day, and we have been revitalizing the 10 bhumis and 13 bhumis. And the way how this relates to kenshos and satoris, it has everything to do with removing this existential pain, existential confusion, removing this belief in self-entity in all of its expressions, in all of its forms. And this is a universal, it's supposed to be the strong point of Buddha Dharma. It is the main point of Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings, this realization of selflessness and emptiness. But again, it's a very different matter if practitioners and lineage holders and masters actually attain it. I know of only one Zen master, Tangen Rossi, who in the past 100 years has attained it. It is possible, of course, that there are few others, but I have met so many like older Roshis myself, and I say that analytical point that it's a different matter whether even really life committed older masters get to there or not, and they're not. But to answer your question about the 4 stages, so Kensho stage, 13 major awakenings. Satori stage, 10 perfections that finishes the Kensho process, that finishes, releases the mind, the causal body into Dharmakaya, kind of changes it into Dharmakaya. So instead of having a samsaric mind that thinks and conceptualizes in terms of me and other, that whole thing stops. Thinking doesn't stop, remembering doesn't stop, feeling doesn't stop. The way how we think, feel, perceive changes. And after that there is no existential confusion at all anymore. So this is, in other words, finishing Kensho stage and Satori stage together, both of them, it means that we see the emptiness of all phenomena. Emptiness, realization of emptiness. And this happens in the subtler of the two subtle bodies that I usually call causal body. This is the realization of Dharmakaya. And then, which means, again, falling away of the mind. We already spoke about falling away of the body. So put those two together, and then the end result is this Nyorai, Jobutsu, becoming a living Buddha. Yeah.
So just to sort of get rid of a bit of confusion of you said the master who said about 95 different awakenings. There's Hakuin who said 17 major awakenings and many of them in between. You're talking about there's a specific number of major awakenings and then the Satori experiences perfections, but there you can have many in between,
Yes.
smaller shifts, smaller awakenings, and perhaps knots and things that remove. But you've also got the body where you've got stuck areas or layers of selfing in the body which drop away as a process. So it becomes many awakenings per se until the final result.
Yes. Yes. So when it comes to the gradual process of realizing emptiness of phenomena, I've also had a few like minor awakenings, minor kenshos, but minor kensho, it still has a little change, but it's just small. So when we talk about kensho, it's a major awakening experience. So that clearly there is before and after. There is a real change in before and after. Yeah.
So if I try and summarize it, perhaps you can correct me if I'm getting anything
Okay.
wrong. But the way I see it is that there's this sort of central knot where we believe that we exist somewhere behind our eyes. And this is the first major Kensho.
Yes.
And then it's as if there are layers. The Boomies, we talk about layers like this, but we can think of it as like layers within the body and then layers within our auric field that the awakening is kind of bursting through each layer. And then a Satori, the process of Satori is perfecting each layer. A way you described it before was working through the residual karma in each layer until that layer perfects, and we get this deeper sense of completeness,
Yes.
wholeness, and that progresses until we are complete and whole in the mind and then in the body.
Exactly. There's nothing for me to correct there. Yeah.
So, um,
And
Zen.
one thing maybe, oh, sorry, one thing maybe I want to say that this is not some game you play in the mind. It is not some puzzle that you are trying to solve or a Rubik's Cube that you're trying to solve in your mind. We are really talking about changing our whole way of being at any given moment. It's really, we are talking about fundamentally changing or releasing our deluded mind into our Buddha mind. And this changes everything. And it doesn't mean like we start to see some mystical things or stuff like this. It's simply that true clarity, true other characteristics of Buddha nature, come into our lives. So that we are talking about realization, gradual realization of Buddha nature and the embodiment, becoming gradually living Buddhas. So this is not some fancy mind game or some philosophical uh, contemplation. No, it's a total transformation of our being and our lives. Yeah. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, nicely put. So, I was thinking from my perspective of Zen, from outside, maybe my naivety of Zen, I look at Zen and think actually there's a lot that would be useful in terms of the body because there's so much of the martial aspects of things, working with chi, working with the meridians. Um, so perhaps we can start there in terms of actual pragmatic practice of what is already good in Zen from that perspective. How do they? You talked of some masters have had the dropping away of the body. How do you think they have achieved that? And is there anything that's perhaps missing now or needs refining in Zen to make that process more effective?
Yes, yes. Something that I haven't studied this. I'm not a scholar, so I'm not really interested in scholarly study, except in slight degree about some historical details. I was just reading like an early history of the Shaolin Temple. Bodhidharma, the first patriarch, who was actually Southern Indian. He was a Southern Indian prince who went to China in early 6th century. And already when he arrived at Shaolin Temple, the Shaolin Temple had been built. There was another Indian monk or a master there called Batuo, who was teaching, had already run the Shaolin Temple for a couple of decades, maybe 20 years or something like this, when Bodhidharma arrived there. Sorry, what was your question? You were talking about.
Oh, we're focusing on. So I was talking of the martial aspect, and
Oh, the energetics. Yeah. So I can't remember now why I started talking about Bodhidharma, except because of you know, nowadays when we go to study Zen Buddhism, I have no experience of first-hand experience of Korean or Chinese versions of Zen. But again, I have carefully analyzed what teachers from those traditions and masters from those traditions, what they say and how they say it, and what their energy tells. Again, not to point, but to be honest and analytical. Is this really a genuine, valid teaching and thing? Is this a really genuine path in that sense? The way how I have thought about it for years is that can we really take any Mahayana path, Mahayana method seriously if there hasn't been at least one living Buddha per generation? I don't think we can, assuming that there has been devoted and dedicated practitioners. But there are so many. Even though Zen Buddhism in Japan and elsewhere in Asia, I think in China there's actually like a how do you say, revitalization of all kinds of Buddhisms and Taoism happening after the communist era. But in Japan, Zen and Buddhism in general has been in steep decline for a long time. But having said that, Japanese Zen Buddhism has been transmitted to West, to Europe, in America. But anyhow, if you go to study with Japanese Zen teachers or Western Zen teachers, they will teach you some simple energetics. The reason why I say simple is because I'm viewing this as a tantric, as a Vajrayana practitioner and as a teacher. and it is very simple. Kind of like in Tibetan yogas, we have so many energy centers in the system. If we imagine that we think of the body space, and we imagine that that whole space is full of these channels, meridians, that are have the width of my little finger, and we just imagine that it's full of those, we can understand that it's pretty complex, like it's pretty extensive. Same with the other subtle body. It has, if you look at different scriptures about this, about the number of nadi channels in the aura, you can find anything from 70,000 to 700,000. So it's full of channels. But if you study with like a simplified Tibetan yoga, they might only teach you 3 or 5 locations or energy centers in the body. In Zen, it is even simpler than that. So my point is that the subtle bodies are very extensive, and we need to understand it. Whether we are practicing this kind of dharma or that kind of dharma, if we are working with a very small area of the subtle body, it is not logical to think or to say that that would be very effective in reaching the full openness and full purification, full transformation of the subtle bodies, which is what dropping of body and mind means. It is simply not logical or rational to say that. So Buddhahood means that our subtle bodies are completely open and running. There is no other type of Buddhahood. If we are talking about Buddhas from Zen tradition, Pure Land tradition, any of the Tibetan lineages, or even other religions, there is no other definition for a Buddha, for a fully enlightened being, than having the subtle bodies completely open and active. Okay? And from this perspective, on the tantric side of things, on the tantric side of my work, in Amrita Mandala, we have all these mantras and all these different practices that we directly engage and cultivate these 2 subtle bodies in their full extent. Is that how you say it? In full extent. But this needs to be done in whatever our path is. Why? Simply because it is effective to do that. It is proper to do it that way. So energetics, chi, ki, dantians, energy centers, we necessarily, this is something that people should think, whether our energy work is effective or not. But usually in Zen practice, the Dantien or Tanden, like it said in Japanese, in the belly is emphasized a lot. I also used to do Dantien practice for all of my Zen training. Also in my extensive martial arts training and Zen art training, a lot of emphasis on the gut. But through my Vajrayana training and when learning Dantians from Chokchen masters, receiving transmission from Chokchen masters about Dantians, my understanding of Dantians, it's very different than in Zen. Quite different. So what could I say about that?
Just 1 second. Someone's trying to chop a tree down outside my room, so I'll just shut the window.
Okay. But maybe something I could say, one very basic practice in Zen is to follow or count the breath in the gut, in the belly, in the lower dantian, and build that lower dantian. And I loved that practice as a young practitioner, and that's all I did day and night for 4 years or so. I was just reading whose book was it that I was reading? A Zen master, but he was saying, maybe it was Yasutani Roshi's. Yasutani Roshi was a Japanese Roshi who passed away in the 1970s. And he said that, you focus on the lower dantian and you build energy there. But if you stop doing that exercise, if you stop focusing in the gut that way, then the effect, that tautness, T-A-U-T, tautness, that firmness that is built through that concentration gradually dissipates. If you stop doing that, it dissipates. And for many years I've been thinking about this. Why do it if it dissipates? Why do we need to focus our energy in one place when in fact energy is everywhere? Why do we need to do it so much? And why would we need so much concentration? Because it takes lots of effort to really to build that lower dantian well. It takes lots of effort. If we follow this traditional view, which is both in Zen, actually also in Taoism, in Chinese Taoism. So it takes lots of effort. And I was thinking about this, like why they view it that way, because that same energy, vital energy, chi, it's in the whole system. So the way how it is traditionally taught is that you focus the energy there, gather there in the belly to quiet the mind, to with the help of concentration and mindfulness, to create this experience of mental silence and calm abiding. And then through this calm abiding and putting the energy in the gut, building something that is called samadhi. In Zen Buddhism they speak of samadhi and pragya. So maybe I will explain this. I made a video of this in Revitalized Zen, but I will briefly explain it. So what samadhi means is not only mental silence, but it also means unification of the body and mind. So unifying body and mind together. And that experience is necessary, is thought in order to get to pragya or wisdom. Pragya, wisdom. So samadhi and pragya. There is a sixth patriarch, Huineng, a Chinese ancient master. He speaks about this in his Platform Sutra, chapter 4. Highly recommend reading Platform Sutra. It's a brilliant text, short text. But the way how awakenings or kenshos are generated or are supposed to be generated in traditional Zen methodology is that first you build this samadhi, this unification of body and mind. You could say absorption with the body and mind, unified energy. And then when you have that, then perhaps from the master who one is working with, or when hearing a bird sing, or seeing a flower or seeing a child that runs past you, it is supposed to pop that bubble of unification, resulting in Kensho or Satori. That's how it is supposed to work, the traditional Zen method. But there are buts. Again, it takes lots of time and effort, daily training, at least 2-3 hours, 4 maybe, to build that kind of samadhi. And you have to keep doing it in order to keep the body and mind unified. And I'm not sure if that is a suitable practice for many lay people these days. I'm not saying that. Definitely there should be people who train to become professionals in this art, specialists in this art. But whether it's suitable for somebody who practices only an hour a day, has small kids, is married, has a job, full-time job, has bills to pay, definitely not suitable in that equation, simply because you don't have the hours and your daily life circumstances are such that you cannot really apply that practice correctly. So it is more suitable, that method, it's more suitable for people who don't have families or might be in relationship but don't have that much going on in life. Very quiet life, or even being monks and nuns. So there are traditional Taoism speaks of 3 dantians. Oh, I said the word traditional. What we consider as traditional Taoism speaks of 3 dantians. And in Zen Buddhism, these 3 are kind of cultivated. Not only the dantian in the belly, but there is also the element of bodhicitta, bodhisattva vows, 4 vows of a bodhisattva, which is a really central practice, really central thing in Zen Buddhism. And that, of course, is supposed to touch the heart. So compassion, love, kindness, it's all about the heart. Different question if it is really applied in a way that it really touches and opens the heart and heals the heart if there is something to be healed. And what I'm referring, healing of the heart, I'm referring to traumas, psychological traumas, developmental trauma. But in principle, that second dantian of the heart is also there through this bodhicitta principle. In principle, the third dantian of the head.
Still.
Can you see me, Chris? I can hear you. Hello. Oh, now you're back. And the third dantian of the head. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Okay, great. So the third dantian of the head is also there in principle in Zen, but it is not really applied very effectively. And the way how it is in principle in Zen Buddhism is because, there's a lot of emphasis of sitting with your body and raking the garden with your body, chopping the vegetables with your body. How do you feel your body? There are 2 different paradigms, training paradigms, which are mindfulness-based approach and awareness-based approach. And these 2 are very different in nature, very different. Mindfulness-based approach is that you focus on whatever you're doing, whatever you're engaging with, and in sitting in meditation you are engaging with the body, could be more specifically engaging with the lower dantian. What happens when we do that inside us. So you sit there and you sit, and then to feel the dantian, to accumulate, build dantian, you turn the, how do you say, what do you call in cars? You have headlights, is that what you call them? You turn the headlight of attention from the head down to the belly and place it there. And then when you start breathing deeply, chi or prana starts to gather there, and it becomes taut, T-A-U-T, taut, firm. But here, in principle, you are using this attention, but you're just aiming it to the body. This is how it is in mindfulness approach. So in principle, the three dantians are there, but this is something that I've spoken about for years and years, the difference of mindfulness and awareness approaches. Awareness approach means that you don't start aiming your focus, your concentration, but you rather remove the need to get focused and remove the causes of distraction. What are causes of distraction? The usual functioning of the self-based, self-deluded samsaric mind. So it's a very different, and the way how it is practically done in Revitalized Zen as well as in Amrita Mandala is mainly through the practice called dynamic concentration. Dynamic concentration, which means dynamic shouting, not chaotic shouting, but dynamic shouting of certain syllables, certain words. For example, shouting the term, the syllables Buddha, Dharma, Sam, Sang, Ha. For example, could be anything related to Dharma. So what happens as a result of this practice, even if we do it half a minute with sharp repeated shouts, again, it removes the need to get concentrated, and it removes the causes of distraction. So it creates an opening in our subtle bodies, and what is in that opening, where there are no causes, where there is no selfing, no distraction, no need to get focused, what shows up is our Buddha nature. And this practice was done, I don't know why this practice isn't done anymore in Zen, but the shouting of syllables was, I don't know exactly how extensively it was practiced in Japanese Zen, but I know that it was practiced by Tangen Roshi, who comes from a Shoto lineage. And it was practiced by this Rinzai Zen Roshi who recently passed away. His name is Shinzan Miyamai Roshi. He passed away maybe 2018, 19, something like this. But he said that when he was young he used to do this, shouting mu syllable. So I don't know what happened, why this practice has been stopped, but this is one of the staple practices in Revitalized Zen. And again, Tangen Roshi, in my observation, is the only Zen Buddhist Buddha within the last 100 years. So it has been at least somewhat traditional, but for some reason it was stopped. With the result of what? That people get stuck in the layers of their mind, in that selfing mechanism, when in fact the way to generate recognition of Buddha nature, to generate those awakenings, kenshos, would be so easy to do. So Yeah, I spoke a little bit about 3 dantians. Many years ago, Terayama Roshi, he taught this 4th dantian. You can see there's a video that was filmed in his home dojo in 2003 when he was 65 years old. This was 4 years before he passed away. You can see him doing some, again in simple terms, yoga and qigong in the video. And there you can see that he connects with his 4th dantian. But there, in the, modern Taoism, they only speak of 3 dantians, but there are actually 4. The subtle body is much more extensive than the traditions teach. And there is a 4th dantian which it goes both down and up. I spoke about the causal body made of nadis that create the auric field around the physical body, and in that part of that aura is this vertical pillar that goes 5-6 meters down from the pelvic floor and 5-6 meters up from the crown of the head. This wide pillar about one's shoulder width wide, up and down. And at the far end of that pillar there is the 4th dantian. So it's the 4th dantian both at the end of the pillar above and at the end of the pillar below. So that's the 4th, and then 3, 2, 1 in the belly. That's the full scope of the subtle bodies. And the reason why it's extremely beneficial to sit, or you can do it in standing posture, you can do it when you do some form of yoga or qigong. When you connect that vertical pillar, it really enhances clarity, enhances softness, kindness, enhances stability, peacefulness. So the way I teach these dantians, 4 of them, is a very direct way. I don't teach it, maybe coming back to that building the dantian. I don't think it is necessary to build dantian. So the way I teach Zen in Revitalized Zen is based on that awareness approach, not mindfulness approach. So I simply teach it differently than traditional Zen, which saves a lot of time for people. It's much more direct. Maybe I'll come back to building of dantian a little bit, that lower dantian a little bit. So after my Zen years, I started asking these questions: that why was it necessary to spend all that time to hone my focus, concentration, and build this tautness in the belly, when in fact I didn't have a Kensho in 4 years. So it was largely, I learned many beneficial things from my traditional training, but it was mainly waste of time. And now, after years of practice, I see it very differently. I don't think it's necessary to build a dantian. You only need to open them up. But there is something I think that many Zen Buddhist lineage holders don't understand, which is what trauma, psychological trauma, does to the mind, does to the subtle body. I'm talking about leaking of chi, leaking of prana, which is that if we have psychic injury, psychological trauma, it breaks our channels. And this means that it keeps leaking out whatever we are doing, even if we are spend the day at home without stress, without anxiety, it keeps leaking out. It's simply because the tubes they are broken. So I think that it's a misdiagnosis when this building of Dantien is done, because the way how to fix the leaks and to increase vitality is not to accumulate it somewhere, but to fix the leaks, stop the system leaking. This is known in Taoism, but I never heard it in Zen Buddhism. So it's necessary to fix these leaks if they are due to trauma. And many people have psychological trauma.
Is this what you're relating to the dissipation? You're holding it, you're focusing, you're building, but then eventually it dissipates. So
Yeah.
to work on, well, why is it dissipating?
Even if the leaks weren't there, if the plumbing was okay, we could test this. If I focus, I'm holding my hand like this. If I start focusing on the sensation in my hand, feeling the hand from the inside, feeling the sensation here, and I'm simply feeling, and it doesn't take long when I start feeling something there. And if I keep doing that, if I keep focusing there, the prana, the chi goes there, gets accumulated there. That's why you have the sensation. When you stop doing that when you start put your mind elsewhere on some other thing, that sensation gradually dissipates from the hand. This is simply the nature how it is. So it's the same thing with the Dantien cultivation, that it will dissipate, just like Yasutani Roshi said in his writings. So it's necessary if and when there are leaks in the subtle body, they need to be correctly healed, fixed. And what happens then as a consequence? There are no leaks anymore. The prana, the chi, stays in the circulation, keeps nourishing the system, makes functioning of the mind, functioning of energetics. Suddenly you have better vitality, better health, and you're not exhausted after day's work or few hours of social interaction. Most people have trauma with other people, are scared of other people, social anxiety, So when your leaks are healed, then you won't experience, you might still have anxiety, but your system is not leaking anymore, which changes a lot. And this also removes the need to accumulate chi in the belly or accumulate it anywhere, because we are naturally connected, even though we are physically, we can see that we are limited in our physical form, but we get nourishment from food and drink, but we are also energetically, through our subtle bodies, connected with larger chi source. And we are naturally connected to that. So if we don't have leaks, we are naturally, energetically fed and sustained. And this is very different take, isn't it? Compared to this traditional view. But what is traditional? What is correct? What works and what doesn't work is a different matter. But coming back to those three Dantians, both in Taoism and, Taoism mainly speaks of the three Dantians. Zen really speaks of only the belly Dantien. to some extent, some teachers teach loving kindness meditation, metta meditation, to open the heart. But in Taoism, there is the view that you go through the dantians one after the other, the belly, the heart, the head, in that order. My view is quite different about this. When we go through those Kensho and Satori stages, we realize Dharmakaya, we realize emptiness in gradually. What happens is that our head, the dantian in the head, gets opened and established. You know, this is this clarity through emptiness, wisdom through emptiness. It's Buddha Shakyamuni's and his followers' main topic of teaching, isn't it? That's what Buddhists talk the most. But it's not really clearly understood that, you know, it's really sobering of the head, sobering of the all energetics related to the head. Clarity is something that we have in the head or in our mind or not. You know, when we have drowsiness, sleepiness, fogginess, chaos, it affects mainly our head. But emptiness, you know, is emptiness places this wisdom in the place of ignorance. And ignorance is seated in the first and foremost in the head, not in the body. Our self-delusion is mainly in the head, though it affects the whole energetic system and the body and our life. Right? So this is what, when we speak of that phrase, Shinjin Datsuraku, dropping away body and mind, that dropping away of mind, it's kind of like throwing away one's head. Yeah. So this is very important in Revitalized Zen also, turning ignorance into wisdom. So that's how you open the dantian of the head. Opening of the heart dantian, it happens, heart is the seat, so head is the seat of Dharmakaya. Heart is the seat of Sambhogakaya, which means the aliveness aspect of Buddha nature. This might sound, for somebody who, you know, in traditional Zen, there are no really explanations of these things. But I explain because it is helpful. When things are not explained, how can you understand things? When kids go to school, they are explained things, and because of that explanation, they learn. If they just, you know, teacher said that, okay, sit there at the desk and, you know, try to learn something without really teaching them, it's not effective. So head is the seat of the Dharmakaya, heart is the seat of Sambhogakaya. Sambhogakaya, it differs how different Buddhist teachers and masters, how they explain it. But Sambhogakaya is the aliveness aspect of Buddha nature. So Buddha nature has the clarity aspect, sobriety aspect, which means that when one's head is clear, it is also selfless. There is no belief in separately existing self. But heart is really the seat of Sambhogakaya and seat of the astral body, that meridian system. So here we come, something that is in modern times, in modern age, when Dharma has spread to Western societies and culture, so many Westerners are traumatized psychologically. So Here, this is actually widely spoken in American Zen. There is a trend in American Zen that Zen teachers, many Zen teachers are psychotherapists, psychologists, sometimes psychiatrists. But if we want to make the body drop off, we need to completely heal all psychological trauma. What is psychological trauma? It means that we have had shocking experiences. Probably early on in childhood. I just received an email yesterday evening from a gentleman who told me that he had birth trauma. He almost suffocated when he was born, and he has had this suffocation, the trauma from suffocation from the moment he was born. And he still has it at 37 years old. But he feels this big energy block here in the heart. It just doesn't flow. The energy just doesn't flow. Elsewhere in the body it flows okay, but not in the heart. I know one British former Zen practitioner who has a stubborn block at the throat. He has very, very traumatic past, and he's been practicing first Zen for 15-20 years and now with me for 7-8 years. But what trauma does in the subtle body, in the meridians, is that it creates this very stubborn knot, K-N-O-T, knot. And the energy is just not flowing through it. And how it affects our mind, thoughts and emotions is that we have a lot of fear, anxiety, depression, all kinds of these typical trauma reactions in completely normal daily situations. So the way I see, in Buddhism there are two principles, shamatha and vipassana, practice principles. These are the same as in samadhi and prajna in Zen. The way I see it is that those shamatha practices, samadhi practices, should be viewed as healing practice rather than concentration practices. And there are a few teachers, Buddhist teachers, who teach shamatha as healing practice, but mostly shamatha or samadhi is taught as this concentratedness and unification of the body in Zen. And we have seen what this does. This, I could call it misdiagnosis, what it results to. It results to people who are senior practitioners, having practiced for 20, 30, 40 years. Some become teachers, some become addressed as roshis, Zen masters, but then they behave traumatically. Sometimes do something erratic, something that is ethically wrong, or sometimes are just affected by their trauma. Well, addiction is a classical sign of unhealed trauma. There are so many Zen roshis who have had addictions. Alcohol, sex, just unethical behavior that they can't help themselves with. But yeah, I think that shamatha could be taught and can be taught as healing practice, which completely changes gives purpose to one's practice, and changes when people practice shamatha as healing practice in room. The energy becomes so different than with this one-pointed concentration practice. So I was saying something about, so shamatha and samadhi is supposed to be a practice that makes the body or the astral body fall off. It's supposed to accomplish that. And some, very few actually, but some Zen masters do accomplish it, but very few. Very few. There is one Zen master who I know who is now 85 years old. He's been practicing full time for 65 years. Was ordained as a Zen monk when he was 20 years old. And his body has fallen off, but his mind hasn't. He hasn't realized the full scope of emptiness. But, imagine 65 years. Who has 65 years? Who can practice with that intensity? Nobody, basically. So we need a very different know-how. We need a very different understanding, view of practice and the applications, practices, techniques themselves. We need a very different understanding to make Zen relevant in the world today. Because it's a very different thing with all this trauma and time we have for practice. It's a very different thing.
That's quite a paradigm shift. If you think of
Yeah.
what the actual goal is, but also I didn't suggest that actually we want this goal for lay people,
Mm.
that we think this is possible for lay people who don't have all this time that monks have. We don't have 65 years of full time to
Yeah.
attain this. I know both you and me have had issues with this over focus with shamatha,
Yeah.
where you're driving. If you think it's a part of how to set yourself up for awakening, that you've got to have such a concentrated mind to have the base for awakening. Well, that's a complete reverse idea of, well, let's relax into the healing element of shamatha, rather than this overly focused. I guess someone who practices for that long kind of begins to understand that you can't maintain that rigid focus, that you have to release it at some point, otherwise you're going to get into a lot of trouble. So then you work out that oh, okay, well, this is, if I loosen up, there's this healing effect in my body. But if we understand this much earlier on, and
Mm.
so that you're talking about this understanding, changing this understanding around has a very profound effect. And is there a way to not only understand that, but to burst through the bubble of the body?
What did you say? Are there practices to do that?
Yeah. So how do we make this practice effective, or more effective, to work through the body and heal the trauma? So
Ah,
this is this other aspect with modern lay people.
yeah.
That almost we've got this extra layer of uh, trauma in our bodies, developmental trauma that we need to work through. So how do we use this idea to address that?
One of my masters, many of the things that I have spoken in this interview and in my videos, both in Revitalized Zen and Amrita Mandala, are things that I needed to discover myself. And I have discovered myself. I have received some help from my masters, like essential pointers, but most of this stuff I figured out myself. And I've again, I really needed to make it work, not only as a teacher for others, but for my own sake, because I still have a little bit of developmental trauma. I haven't finished my Daigo phase. My body hasn't fallen away permanently. Momentarily has for many times. But yeah, first and foremost, I needed to make this work for myself. And of course, that's the best way to become a teacher. Not that you are simply repeating what is said in the classics and the books, but teaching from first-hand experience, having experienced delusion, the full scope of it, traumatization, a large scope of it. There's obviously lots of variety in trauma. I was not a child soldier fighting in a war, but I still had pretty bad developmental trauma, complex trauma. And this is very current in the world today. I think that traumatization is not happening for the first time in the modern West. The history of humankind is pretty traumatizing, but it affects so much what is happening around the person who is getting traumatized, who has a shocking experience. The close community, family, society, village community, these things are very, very different. You could say non-existent in the modern city living than they were just a few decades ago, 100 years ago, when people lived in very small communities. And I am not at all saying that, when people lived in smaller societies and villages, that it was healthy. But I am saying that communities were closer. So this aloneness that modern people have, this disconnection from neighbors, it's and then of course now we have smartphones and internet all the time keeping us distracted. It's kind of like made for worsening the trauma. It's kind of like that. So this we need to understand, and like I mentioned, in America there is this trend of combining psychotherapy with Zen Buddhism, which is fantastic. But again, if we want to attain Buddhahood, if we want to get to the end of Daigo stage, make the body fall off permanently, we need to heal the trauma completely. And complete healing of trauma is not really discussed in psychology and psychotherapy. I've listened to trauma specialists like Gabor Mate and others, and they never speak of that. So, I'm a lay person, I'm not a psychologist or a psychotherapist, so I don't really know exactly, but my point is that I have never heard it spoken. But it needs to go, it needs to be fully healed, so that we can finish the Daigo stage, graduate from Daigo stage and become Buddhas. Sorry, what was your question again?
How do you do that?
How
How does
did,
a lay
yeah,
person go about
so
progressing this technique of so you say samadhi helps, but is there a way to and the paradigm shift of it being a healing practice when we
right.
go
Yeah, well, though that's an important point in that sense. But then, both in Amrita Mandala and Revitalized Zen, there are a number of trauma healing practices that we use to block or heal the channels that leak, fixing them, and then doing a number of other trauma healing practices that we apply as long as is necessary for our trauma to be healed. One of the basic techniques that we do is reverse suppression of emotions. So we suppress our emotions, our anger, our frustration, our whatever emotions, because we are not taught that we should express them when they come up. So we suppress them. But one very simple technique is doing that in reverse, giving yourself a permission to giving yourself a permission so that all these suppressed emotions can come up. It's extremely effective to do, but it's also very demanding, because suddenly all this anger and hatred all kinds of things, they start coming up. And it's really sticky stuff. If it's been sitting there for decades. But, nevertheless, we have to work through it, no matter how demanding or easy it is. So reverse suppression is one of those. There are a number of others, but then that's the trauma healing side related to the astral body. But then there are also purification practices, breathing practices with using Buddha's name or name of an ancestor practice that we can do to open up and to purify and to activate the meridian system. So it's a number of practices. This is if we look at modern Soto Zen, the methods are, I would say, oversimplified, extremely simple, just sitting without much instruction, and then some chants and little rituals. Rinzai Zen is much more varied in terms of methods, but when it comes to energetics, it's not very, very extensive. They have something like 1700 koans, and there are different categories of koans. And again, purely as an analytical point of an engineer, how credible it is to have a Rinzai Zen Dharma, like an authorized Dharma teacher, if we can see that they have 2, 3 or 4 bhumis open, that they have had 2, 3 or 4 awakening experiences through 1700 koans that they have trained for often for 20 years. It is not effective. And this is the very reason why Terayama Roshi, my master, stopped doing that, because he saw that all this effort, hundreds of sessions for 20 years, and then you have had 3 awakenings, 3 major openings. There's 10 missing there. So the Buddha nature hasn't become, it's still like a bit of a stranger to you. It's not a lived, recognized experience. You're not living it. And you know it. If you're honest, you know it. No matter who you are or what your title is. Yeah.
3 or 4 in the grand scheme of things, that you haven't stabilized yourself yet in the selfless clarity. You have punctured a couple of holes.
Yeah.
So you understand the non-dual to a certain aspect, but you're not stable in the non-dual yet.
Yeah, definitely not. The stability comes when you have 11 major kenshos. There are these, I was speaking about 10 bhumis, dasha bhumi, and these 10 bhumis or 10 grounds, it means, it speaks of the samsaric layers of the causal body. But when you have 11th opening, you burst out from the whole samsaric system. You create a pathway which there's a paradigm shift there. You are no longer closed in within the samsaric mind, but suddenly this Buddha nature with its clarity, softness, groundedness becomes your prevalent mode. You don't become a Buddha when you get to this advanced Kensho stage, one of the final stages of Kensho. You don't become a Buddha yet, but for most of the time, 50% or more of the time, you rest in effortless clarity. And if you have done 1700 koans, finished the whole koan training, and you have had 3 or 4 openings, which is common for Rinzai, young Rinzai Zen teachers. That is not even close there. We are talking about effortless clarity. You don't need to do anything to sustain it, anything to cultivate it. It's just there. It's your clarity. So it's a very different method, very different view.
You perhaps want to say a little bit more about what ancestor practice actually is.
Okay, done a couple of videos of this, maybe 2-3 videos, and so I met Tangen Roshi in 2005, actually in April 2005, so exactly 20 years ago. And meeting him, we had 3 or 4 private conversations. The very first moment when I arrived in his temple, Bukkokuchi, in Obama, Japan, everybody was, I think they were meditating, or maybe they were out doing takuhatsu. But I arrived there and I was in the yard temple when I suddenly saw that I saw a small piece of brocade disappear into behind one of the buildings towards the graveyard. And I felt that, oh, who's wearing brocade here? And I went, followed, and there was Tangen Roshi, he was maybe 82 years old at the time in 2005. He was there, holding his, what do you call this that you...
Fan.
Fan. He was holding a fan in his hand, in his beautiful robes, just, happily out there smiling to himself, looking at the sky and looking at the birds and trees. Really like a classical. If you think of a great Zen master, that's exactly the romantic scene, And I went to him and I joined my hands and bowed and I introduced myself. And what I remember from that conversation, he pointed to a cherry tree. I think it was cherry tree, that he said that I planted that tree 50 years ago. And now look at it, so beautiful, it was blooming. And long story short, that was the first discussion that I had with him. And standing there, we discussed maybe 5 minutes outside there. There was no one else around. And I could feel that I had met a number, maybe 10 or so Zen teachers and Zen Roshis by then, but just feeling his energy, I noticed immediately that this is a different animal. This is a different kind of being. And then I was lucky to have Dokusan with him one-on-one, where we discussed in a bit more detail, and he shouted at me. That shout is still echoing in my body. And then when I left, he gave me one of his calligraphies that I still have. But that was like a watershed moment for me, meeting him, meeting a living Buddha. And I didn't understand why he was so different. Everybody said that his nickname was the old Buddha. And he was regarded as an enlightened being, but I didn't exactly understand what it means until many years later. So then soon after I came back from Japan, I had this overheating of my body with Zen practice, and that was when the painful disillusionment took place. I realized that I just can't follow this Zen path anymore because it's not working. And I stopped doing it, and that same year I found my way to tantric practices, Vajrayana practices, and it completely changed my experience. It had been maybe a year from the last week-long session that I practiced, and I still vividly remembered how it felt after a week-long Zen retreat. And I could have that same clarity, that same softness, that same experience through 30 minutes of tantric practice. So it was a huge eye-opener for me, you know. And I started then, slowly I started analyzing that. Well, how can it be like that? You know, you're sitting for a week, you're barely sleeping, and then I can have the same effect in 30 minutes. A real eye-opener. What was your question again?
So just talking about what actually is ancestor
Oh,
practice like.
ancestor practice. Yes, yes. So I started doing tantric practices, and one of the practices is ancestor practice. It's called guru yoga in tantric terminology. And that changed my life. What do you do in guru yoga? You can think of any great master like Buddha Shakyamuni, or maybe, you know, in tantric world you speak of Guru Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, he's known as, or any other great master. And the principle behind this is that Buddhas are no longer in the samsaric wheel, self-repeating wheel. They are out of it. So in other words, they are outside of time and space. In other words, they are no longer bound by karma, except the karma that they have with people. But they are no longer bound by the karma of their minds. Okay? So they are beyond time and space. This means that we can invite Guru Padmasambhava, whose image is here behind me, or Buddha Shakyamuni, or Buddha Kashyapa, who was, for example, who was Buddha's predecessor, the previous world Buddha, and feel them and receive their blessings. This is staple practice in Vajrayana. And I did it for many, many years. And then I heard that Tangen Roshi passed away in 2018. And when he passed away, people released a quote from him where he said, I actually have it here. I have the same note that I used when I did the first Revitalized Zen video, so I happen to have it. But Tangen Roshi said, before he passed away, he said, when I die, I won't go anywhere. I will be just here, and call me anytime, I will respond. After his death, after his passing, call me anytime, I will respond. And I had never heard this being said by a Zen master in modern times or in ancient times. I had never heard it said. But when I heard it in 2018 that he had said it, it made complete sense. By then I already knew and understood that Tangen Roshi was a living Buddha, that he was a Mahasiddha. But when he said this, that, you know, I have never, it's possible that some Zen masters have said it. I don't know all of them. I don't remember all scriptures. It's possible, but I had never heard it. But it sounded, it is exactly the same what tantric masters say, commonly say. And it got me thinking, okay, there is this recitation of the lineage masters of 90 generations in all Zen groups and Zen temples, monasteries. And I had seen it many times in these recitations, that sometimes in ordination ceremonies, that there is this immense blessing in the air. I didn't notice in my Zen days because nobody pointed it out. So I completely ignored it together with everybody else. I didn't have the know-how to connect with it or to notice it. But through my tantric training, I became to understand this, That always when we pray, when we say Buddha Shakyamuni's name, Buddha Amitabha's name, or all these lineage masters, there is always they come to us. Those who have gone beyond time and space, who have transcended karma, who have transcended samsara, they show up. Lesser masters don't have the capacity for it. This is a very important point. There are Buddhas and then there are the rest, basically. Okay? So I started thinking about this, and slowly this idea of this concept of revitalized Zen started forming in my mind. Tangen Roshi is saying that you can call him after he dies and he will respond. How will he respond? Well, my experience of having called him and him responding is that he shows up and is happy to share his presence, his blessings with you, just like he did when he lived in that small temple in Kokuchi. Just like all Buddha Shakyamuni and all these masters, Zen Patriarch Bodhidharma, Huineng, Zen Master Dogen, just to name a few whose blessings I've received. So this changed my view of, in one way, how my view changed of Zen. Because, if we listen, there is so much this fundamentalism and dogmatism and materialism and nihilism in Zen. This total denial that this is not about Kensho. Our practice is not about Kensho, like what the hell? Or, when you say something like ancestor practice or guru yoga, when you actually, this is hypothetical what I'm saying, but to make a point, if you said to some of these people that, Tangen Roshi is literally himself saying that when I die, I will be just here and call me anytime I will respond. He's literally telling you what to do. But some of them will immediately brush it away and say that it's superstition, it's some woo-woo nonsense. But it isn't. It isn't.
And this was a very big change in the dynamic of my practice when I came to you and you
Yeah.
pointed out these blessings.
Yeah.
I'd practiced with Guru Rinpoche, Amitabha, a whole range of these archetypal Buddhas, etc. But it had never been pointed out to me to recognize the blessings. Um, it's almost to what is the point of these mantras of going through the 90 different ancestors,
Yeah.
uh, doing puja with such and such Buddha or archetype. Uh, the purpose is just outer form to help still the mind through mantra, or is there something a lot more? Like it goes. The whole practices are quite extensive and pretty deep for it just to be a surface level reason. How do these things actually help us to awaken? And we can try it in our own experience.
Mm.
It was something quite novel to me to think of in terms of mystical elements of practice, but ultimately, why are we doing it uh, otherwise? And from a logical standpoint, to me, it helped to think of a Buddha is beyond time and space. Time and space is what we project out. If we become a Buddha, then we're beyond time and space. So why can we not have direct access to these Buddhas? But the blessings are very subtle, like particularly at the beginning. It's we need to dial up our sensitivity and be open to what these blessings are. We don't have to accept it straight away, but to feel into it and begin to be curious about, well, why is it that I feel completely different within half an hour instead of a whole week? How
Yeah,
is it that I'm getting this immediate transformation?
yeah, exactly, exactly. You know, the thing is, this is written in all the Mahayana sutras. This is something that all Zen masters speak about all the time, about this compassion and kindness and love that Buddhas have, that Bodhisattvas have. You know, one of my favorite short sutras that was chanted in the temple is the 10 verse sutra of Avalokitesvara. It's called Enmeijikku Kannun Gyo in Japanese, which is like a very short prayer to Avalokitesvara. But this applies to Bodhisattva vows, this applies to all the meal prayers, to all of these basic prayers, that there is an energetic element there. But I remember chanting Enmeijikku Kannun Gyo some years when I've already practiced Tantra for some time. And I chanted it because it was one of my favorite sutras. And I noticed that, oh, there's energy in this. That there are blessings in this. There is the actual presence of Avalokitesvara that I'm feeling. Actual presence of this bodhisattva of compassion. So Buddhas and bodhisattvas have this limitless love, and they don't have limitations. They don't have limitations. You know, somebody might be concerned that, okay, if I pray to Shakyamuni Buddha and ask for his blessings, will there be some ghost, or is it some scary, or is there something dodgy with it? But again, Buddhas are not sentient beings. Buddhas are fully enlightened beings. Tangen Roshi was a fully enlightened being. Zen Master Dogen, Zen sixth patriarch Huineng, Bodhidharma's gurus, such as Pragyatara, Punyamitra, Shakyamuni Buddha, and many others, they are Buddhas. Limitless. Don't have limitations. And it is that simple. And this should be taken seriously, especially by practitioners and teachers who do not have access to a living master, to a living Buddha. Because they have, all Zen Buddhists have access, whether you are Soto, Rinzai, whoever you are. It all started with Shakyamuni Buddha, through many generations to Bodhidharma, probably to Huineng, and then it started going to different lineages in different countries and areas. But we all have these common ancestors. And in Revitalized Zen, we do this ancestor practice where we invite Tangen Roshi, Dogen, Zenji, and others. And we get this in Japanese Zen, in Soto tradition, you speak of Dokusan. In Rinzai, you say San Zen, when you are meeting Zen master one-on-one. But this is the heart and soul of San Zen and Dokusan. When you are meeting a Buddha, a fully enlightened being. I will tell you another example. I told it in one Revitalized Zen video, but many years ago I joined this session with a Soto Zen teacher, and there was a sangha of maybe 20 people there, practicing for 5 days, five maybe. And at the end of it, there was an ordination ceremony. Few people took lay ordination and precepts. And it was maybe 10 A4s of ceremonial text, where there are different things you go through, the precepts, and one whose name was mentioned maybe 20 times or more, 30 times, was Buddha Shakyamuni. And there was also repeated veneration towards the lineage masters. And by then I had practiced Tantra for a number of years. And when that ordination ceremony started, that recitation of the started, I noticed that the room became really, the air became thick with blessings. It was beautiful. At the same time, I noticed that nobody in the room except myself was noticing and connecting with it. I went to discuss with the teacher, who's a lovely man, lovely person. I met him a couple of times, both in Europe and Japan. I went to ask him that, Sensei, did you notice that there was this charge in the room during and after the ceremony? And he said that, no, I never noticed that. Practitioner of 30 plus years. But it is always there. Always these Buddhas who have no limitations, are limitless. They always show up. And they are always ignored. Not in Revitalized Zen. This Sun Zen, it's often said that Zazen or sitting practice is most important element of Zen. It is not. Sun Zen is. Dokusan is. Because there you are supposed to meet like a living master. But in the absence of actual living masters, ancestor practice is indispensable. Yeah.
And then through the practice, they support your Zen.
The Buddha we have inside us becomes more and more apparent. That's actually an important point. They don't need our veneration. They don't need, they don't need us to worship them. That's completely out of the picture. But how we can benefit is that the Buddha we have inside becomes more and more apparent when we do ancestor practice or Buddha practice. That's how it is.
And you pointed out one of the very first things you said in this conversation was how the purpose of the practice is to reveal your own Buddha nature over and over again, not just sitting there, not quite knowing what to do in Seizen, not being told what to actually look for, what characteristics to look for in your Buddha nature, but to actually cut through to your own Buddha nature through dynamic concentration. In this case, using ancestor practice, Buddha practice to support this recognition of our Buddha nature so that we can have those awakenings and so that we can support our healing practice to work through our traumas.
Yeah, it is really simple. I think that all techniques should be pointing to this one single matter of recognizing Buddha nature, making that happen. If it's not happening, then I don't think we are discussing an authentic Buddhist path. It's a rough thing to say, but if you don't have that basic standard right, then you're not going to have anything right, pretty much. Yeah.
So this is your project, Revitalized Zen, and you want to help help people sort of understand these elements that they're doing these practices but not quite cutting through to Buddha nature. So where do you see Revitalize Zen going, or what are you excited about next? And you have some Revitalize Zen retreats coming up.
Well, those who want, the reason why I'm making YouTubes and blog posts, texts, is just to make the message available, make this perspective available. I don't feel like I need to do this, but earlier I was speaking about this responsibility. I see so many basic problems in Zen Buddhism. Of course, what I've done in Amrita Mandala is like a revitalization of or reinvention of Tantra, because it's very different compared to the Vajrayana establishment, with very different results when the basic mistakes and problems are removed or corrected. It's a very different kind of animal. But it's coming mainly from responsibility. You know, it is not easy. Sometimes it is a fucking burden, honestly, to be a spiritual teacher, to be a Dharma teacher. Not because, well, you are teaching people who are categorically samsaric beings, and being a samsaric being yourself, you constantly have to keep your own shit in check so that you don't get entangled with when your students are bringing you stuff and sometimes are very mean and rude to you. So it is not something that you do for enjoyment. At least the way how I do it, you know, I'm very available to people who train with me. You know, I speak about my personal life and experiences. I speak about what I'm pissed off about. Kind of sincere and honest in that sense too. And it's simply something I feel like I need to do. And there is this sense of responsibility there. Responsibility. But there is also, of course, sometimes there's this samsaric wrestling, samsaric fights with students, but of course there is also growing gradually. So I feel this responsibility towards Terayama Roshi, towards other teachers who I've studied with. My interest or enthusiasm towards Zen and arts comes from past lives, whatever the viewers might think of it. But it comes from past lives. I remember past lives, being a Zen practitioner and pretty advanced in that. Mm-hmm. So it is simply something that is not only near to my heart, but it's who I am.
Yeah. You have this.
Huh?
You have this soft spot for Zen. I think I'm seeing some enthusiasm come out of you for starting this project, and I feel like you're touching some of that sort of mojo that you had in your 20s, perhaps when you moved to Japan and had all of these expectations. You're in a way you're trying to revitalize that too.
Yeah, definitely. I feel inspired. But it remains to be seen if my message of Revitalized Zen, if it finds the right people. I've decided that I will give this a go for 2 years. But if I don't reach the people, then I will stop doing it. But what I know from so far is that it strikes a chord with many people. There are many people. I've received YouTube comments and then emails where, and of course, you know, having taught that Zen Sangha in UK and Ireland, people recognize what I present, the problems that they have suffered of or are suffering of. So, of course, why it wouldn't be the case? You know, I'm not teaching some belief-based stuff. I'm not teaching mind games. I'm teaching recognition of Buddha nature, healing, and different techniques of doing that. I'm teaching, giving a teaching where this dropping off of body and mind is taught. So, I would expect that it resonates some people, and some people want to do training with me.
Yeah.
But at this point, I'm simply offering, and I don't know if the offering is received or not. So, but have to try, have to try.
Yeah. It would be nice to think that this is a different perspective on your teachings, that you're opening it out to other people who might not sort of look at
Yeah, yeah.
these teachings, but because of their influence in Zen or their karmic draw towards Zen. Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely the case. I've had many people, including most of that. When I was invited to become the new teacher of the UK and Ireland based Zen group, I didn't really understand the karmic readiness between Sutra and Tantra. So I taught both Sutra and Tantra to these people. And the result was that they got benefits from the practice, but because they kind of didn't click with the tantric explanation and the tantric method, gradually they all kind of disappeared and left the Sangha there. Some of them are still there practicing with me, but through that experience I began understanding why it is necessary to have different types of methods. And that somebody who has karmic affinity and interest towards Tantra might not have for Zen, and vice versa. So, and myself having karmic affinity with both, it is natural to do both. But my students, they don't have to follow both. This is something that I have been clear that the two methods don't mix, and they don't need to be mixed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, it's been very interesting for me in my sort of preparation for this to go over some of your Revitalized Zen YouTubing,
Mm.
and you've got a blog out. So reading through all of these things, it's the same stuff that you teach, but looking from a different lens, and it's
Yeah.
sort of going back through these things and sort of observing and understanding them from a different perspective. So that's been quite interesting for
Yeah. Yeah,
me to
it's
know.
interesting for me too.
So Baba has a blog, and he does YouTubing, Revitalize Zen, and you've also got three retreats coming up: 17th, 18th of May, a slightly longer one, 16th to the 19th of August, which is a Saturday to a Tuesday, and the 20th to the 21st of September. And if you want to find out these things, Baba has a Facebook page, Revitalized Zen Facebook page. Was there anything else you wanted to add at the
Well,
moment?
we have those retreats coming up that will happen physically here in Slovenia at our center, but also in Zoom, so online. But we also have Saturday sessions, 2 hour sessions
Yeah.
that you can also check those from Facebook. But yeah, that's it. Then I'll keep YouTubing. I was thinking about you making YouTubes for a few years at least, but I somehow didn't feel like starting it. And then I felt like with this revitalized Zen, I was wanted to start doing it, and I did, and it's been very inspiring. Kind of a different way of communication. And through doing revitalized Zen YouTubes, I actually came to a decision to start YouTubing also in the tantric context. This is a bit of a news that I've been keeping the last week or so, but there will be an extensive YouTube series that I'm preparing entitled Reinventing Buddhist Tantra,
Ah, cool.
which is based on, well, I'll talk about it later, but it's based on this series of different topics around Buddhist Tantra, and I will go through these topics one by one. So that will also happen in near future.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Baba. Thanks for joining me in this conversation, and it's been thoroughly enjoyable. Thanks for all the new perspectives and different ideas, and hope people take something out of this. You can also check out amritadotbabaathotmaildotcom, which is our main website. So thank you very much, everyone. Blessings.
My pleasure, my pleasure.